Everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing a guide for the Ogres. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Check out the rest of the offerings as well. So we've got an in-depth Nurgle guide that's been very popular. We also have a Slanesh guide, and I'm currently working through an Ogre campaign. I'm going to be working through a Nurgle campaign, and then I'm probably going to be doing a Cathay campaign with Miao Ying. So check all that out. It's coming out very soon. And I'm going to start releasing episodes of the Ogre campaign today, so check back here in a few hours if you enjoy the guide, if you want to see how I put that guide into practice and actually play through. Okay. And if you're new to the channel as well, just kind of like my vibe that might be a little bit different from some of the other channels is that I do play it on Legendary very hard, but I try to do no cheese, so just straight up clean battles the way the game, in my opinion, is intended to be played. And we just try to look for some good, innovative, challenging things we can do. We don't always just take the safe battles. We go for some action. We try to get rowdy in these campaigns. So usually I try to make it as interesting as possible for you guys. So be sure to check those out, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get in here. And this is just supposed to be, a good overview just to kind of give you some choices that you can make early on, and just kind of what's been working for me, some stuff that hasn't been working, and just what I think is an optimal playstyle. And I'm looking at Scrag right now, so I'm going to be talking mostly about Scrag, but I think a lot of this will also apply to Goldtooth. His situation is a bit different, so the early turns will obviously be a bit different, but in terms of the kinds of units you should get, the techs you should get, the battle strategies you should use that we're going to be talking about, I think it'll be very, very similar. But I wanted to do Scrag for a couple of reasons. Number one, he starts in the Empire, so you're surrounded by hostiles. You're going to get into a lot of fights early. It's a lot of action. Versus Goldtooth is going to start up here, and it's kind of in your best interest, probably, to play politics with some of these people up here, which means there's just fewer aggressive options that you can go for, which is okay. He does get benefits to trade, and his bonus to Iron Guts is actually quite good. I think those are probably better than the Gorgers in the mid to late game, which is what Scrag specializes in. But nevertheless, I just really like the location down here and just being aggressive. Another thing that Scrag has going for him is he gets a lot of movement speed, which kind of doubles down on the aggression. So you get an extra 10% campaign movement speed for everybody. You get +1 hero capacity for butchers, and you get extra rank, which are very good wizard type of units. And you have this Great Maw option, which I'm not able to pull it up, I don't think, on either Lord right now, so I think they both have it. But pretty much every 10 turns, you can pay just a little bit of meat, 10 meat. We'll talk about what that is here in a second. You can pay just a little bit of meat, and it'll give you a bonus. So the best one that you want to do most of the time is 20% movement speed. So you combine that with the racial, you're getting 30% bonus movement speed. So you can really cover some ground. It helps a lot against, like I said, you're just going to be getting tons of aggression. They're going to be trying to backdoor your towns. So just having that movement speed to rotate around is really nice. And a lot of these towns, there's a bit more distance, I think, in this game than there was in Warhammer 2. I know some other content creators have talked about that as well. Where with a lot of factions, it might take 2 turns to move between towns. With Scrag, usually it only takes 1 turn because you have that extra movement speed. So again, helps on offense, helps on defense. Campaign movement is, one of the best stats in the game, so he gets a ton of it, and that's fantastic. You do have another option with this as well, where you can give your entire army +10 melee attack. So if you have a really tough fight going on, then you can do that as well. But you can't switch it in the middle of those 10 turns. You have to choose one every 10 turns, and that's it. You have to stick with it for 10 turns. But you can change it later. So if you do have a really crazy fight coming up, and your campaign movement buff's going to wear off in like 2 turns, then you could just raid and buy some time and then go for the 10 if you want. But really nice buff, and that's something that Goldtooth does not have access to, is sacrificing some of this food. Okay, so what are some of the other things going on? I've got some notes over here on the other monitor just to make sure I hit the highlights. So the major identity of Ogres is they have a lot of very just large monstrous infantry. That's their whole thing. So it's really, really powerful early on. It's 125 gold base for these units, and you get a lot of value for that. So they have quite a bit of health at 8,000 health. Their armor's not great at 30, but they do have pretty good leadership. Nice speed. That's something that a lot of people underestimate, is most infantry is going to move somewhere in the 30s, like 35-ish movement speed, depending on the faction. But they have that full 54, so that's approaching almost cavalry-like move speed. So that's good for a couple of reasons. Number one, it allows you to position well to get flanks. And then number two, it's going to give you more impact damage on your charges when you hit people from behind. Because they have quite a lot of unit mass. I don't know if it tells you the unit mass. Okay, it does actually now tell you unit mass, which is cool. But yeah, they have 1,500 unit mass versus like typical infantry. And these guys are a little on the light side. But these guys have 90. I don't know if it's going to tell us. Let me see if I can hover one of these guys. Yeah, so these guys have 100 mass. Right? So the ogres have 1,500 mass, so they're really heavy, and I don't know the exact formula, how that plays into charges, but I know that that does affect the physics. So you do a certain amount of impact damage, which is all armor penetration damage, based on your velocity and your mass when you run into somebody. So in the geography can play into that too. Like if you're running downhill, you're going to get more velocity. It's going to cause more impact damage. But the bottom line is, when they charge, it hits. It'll really knock some people around. It really does a lot of impact damage. And you're just not going to see that from tier 1 infantry that's like 125 gold from other factions. So that's really powerful. And in fact, they have a special charge called the Ogre charge. So when you're charging into someone that's braced, so like spears or something like that, then the ogres only lose half of their charge bonus. Now, I don't know if that affects the impact damage, but whenever you charge as well, you get a certain charge bonus, and this is something that lasts, from what I've heard, 13 seconds. It kind of changes depending on the game, whether it's Warhammer 1, Warhammer 2, a historical title, or whatever. But typically, it's somewhere around 10 to 13 seconds where you get a temporary bonus to your melee attack and your weapon damage. So you would get 44 bonus to melee attack and 44 bonus to weapon damage for 13 seconds after you charge. So that's really big. So they have huge charge bonus too. This is bigger than a lot of entry-level cavalry. And I don't even have any bonuses. And you can get some bonuses to their charge bonus that we'll talk about here in a second. But that is hitting hard, right? So they're going to do a lot of impact damage. They're going to have a ton of charge bonus. They're going to be pretty fast, so they're going to be able to maneuver and get into those flanks. They have really high weapon strength. They have 90 weapon strength early on. They cause fear, which is going to be, great at lowering the morale of a lot of these Empire units. So you're just getting a fantastic bargain for these guys. And all of them are not only siege attackers, they can smash down gates really quick, but they can literally just smash down the walls. You don't even have to go to the gates. So that means you can rotate with your ogres during a siege, just run quickly to some part of the map. It doesn't even have to be a gate, and just start pounding down the walls in a strategic location where you want to breach and get into the town. So, as I keep saying, it's one of the best tier 1 units out there that you can get, especially just right off the bat without having to have special technologies or anything else to go with them. These Ogre Bulls are just insane. How much value. Now, yes, if you do stick them in combat and they just sit there against something like spears, they're going to have a hard time. So their melee attack is not phenomenal. This guy does have some buffs on him. But their melee attack is not phenomenal. It's okay. Their melee defense is not great. So you don't want to leave them in combat with spears and just never touch them again. But other than that, if you're moving around, if you're charge cycling with them, if you are splitting the enemy up, making them skirmish a little bit with you, then those are going to be phenomenal. I think they're right up there with Nurglings in terms of like MVP tier 1 units, especially on a cost basis. If you doubt the Nurglings, watch my watch my Nurgle guide, watch my Nurgle campaign. Those are incredibly powerful as well. But these ogres are right there too for different reasons. They're very, very strong. So, and a lot of their units are like that. If we look at their roster, and their real roster is in the camps, and we'll talk about that in a second. But they just have a lot of those types of things. They have the Ogre Bulls, which are going to be very strong. They've got Ogre Bulls with Iron Fists. Basically what these do is it gives them a little bit more armor. It gives them shields, gives them some higher melee defense, significantly higher melee defense. So it's a really nice upgrade to the standard Ogre Bulls. It's only about 40 more gold. So if you want to get those are solid. You can also get the dual weapons, which is going to give you 12 bonus versus infantry. So that does help you out a little bit if you do want to stay in those longer fights. So again, very good if you want to get those. And then you have the Iron Guts, which have very heavy piercing damage, really heavy armor. So those can stay in combat for quite a while. And they have more well-rounded stats at 36, 36. So they still have the good charge bonus, but if you want to have kind of your frontline hammer and anvil style of play with the ogres, then these are the best ones to put in there. Now, those are significantly more expensive, though. Those are double the cost of standard ogre bulls, so keep that in mind. Then you have these nobblers, and I'm kind of torn on the nobblers. You have sort of these just basic, spear variant, but they don't get a bonus versus large. It's like goblins, basically. Goblin spears. Then you have these trappers, which have a little bit of ammo. They do very minimal damage. These are exceptionally cheap. The normal ones are just 50 gold. So this is some nice just chaff to put in your army. However, they do take up food. We'll talk about food in a second. So they eat the same amount of food as a normal ogre does. 1 food per turn, per unit, per army. But if you're good on food and you just need some stuff to just kind of frontline for you while your ogres charge in over and over again, these can do the job. I mean, they're worse than goblins, significantly worse than normal goblins, but they're also just really, really cheap. And you can get some upgrades to these too. You can lower the cost even more to make them like almost zombie level costs, like almost free. And you can get in the red tree for the skills. You can give them +6/+6, which gives them some extra survivability. So basically, I wouldn't get these most of the time. I would just run with the ogres unless you just really, really need to fill out your roster. But just keep in mind, you don't always have to have 20 units. If you just have like 10 to 15 really strong mid-tier ogre units, right? Like you've got some iron guts, you've got some scrap launchers, you got a Mournfang cavalry or two. You may not need a 20 stack. So anyways, because you should be skirmishing a lot with the ogres if you can. You don't just want to sit there in a huge pile of units. You want to constantly be charge cycling and looking for advantages like that. So anyways, you can get the nobblers. They can be useful, but it's not entirely necessary most of the time with this style of army. Then you have some cats. These are good, like war dogs, basically. These are good at just kind of running down, harassing archers if you need that. Running down fleeing units is one of their big things, just to make sure you finish them off. They don't rally and come back. So they're all right. They cost about the same amount as ogre bulls, though, and so I'd probably rather just go with the bulls most of the time. But they do a lot of damage. They have 70 weapon strength. They're really fast at 95, but kind of unnecessary, I think, because the ogres can run them down too at 54 speed most of the time. Then you have your gorgers. These are really strong, especially with Scrag, because he gets 50% off. So these are only, like 160 something, 163 gold per, or excuse me, 138 gold per. Math is hard sometimes. And they're good. They still have a good charge bonus. They get a nice bonus versus infantry of 20, so that's even better than the dual weapon ogres. They do have even less armor than usual, but they are unbreakable. They do have stalk and vanguard, so you can really sneak up on the back line. So these are okay. They do take 2 turns to hire, so that is kind of a bummer. But they're all right. You can use them. I do think that in general the Iron Guts are better. So Gold Tooth gets a 50% discount on Iron Guts, and I think those have a very unique role because they have huge armor. If you want a strong front line, versus these are like, a little bit better ogre bulls with like dual weapons. But they're all right. Hunter's pretty good. He gives you the increased mobility. He has a couple of other perks. He's not insane, but just the mobility, you want to pick them up as soon as you can. Man-eaters are just kind of better ogres across the board. If you just want a generic, hey, this guy's better, but he does kind of the same tactical function as normal ogres. They have bigger charge bonus. They have high weapon strength, bigger melee attack, defense, a little bit more armor, better leadership. So they're just better. They're just more elite across the board. 300 gold, so they do start to get pretty expensive. And then if you go up the Man-Eaters, it's the same drill as normal ogres. You get the Iron Fist, has a shield, better defense, better armor penetrating. And then at the very top, you have a couple of unique ones. You do have the Great Weapons. Now these are going to be your hardcore anti-large with 26 bonus versus large. So that's very good at kind of trading charges with enemy cavalry. And remember, these guys are thick, right? Like these are even thicker than usual. This can charge into most cavalry. And still hold their own and not get knocked over. So those are pretty strong if you want the anti-cav. And then you do have the Man-Eaters with pistols. I haven't used these. I don't know if this like splashes at all. It does pretty heavy missile damage, but my instinct is it probably doesn't. But if you want kind of a hybrid unit that can fire a little bit and then charge in and attack as well, they're going to be really solid. As far as your cavalry goes, you got just your standard Mournfang Cav, which are okay. They do have quite a bit of armor piercing damage. They are on the expensive side at 300, but they are fairly fast for something that's that heavily armored at 75, and they weigh quite a lot, so they have a good charge bonus, 3,500, so they're big. Then you have various variants of that, so you have the great weapons. This is your anti-large, so plus 30 versus large, so that's going to be a great cavalry superiority unit. Okay, I'll turn it back on in a second. Here, why don't you play with this for a minute, then we'll turn it back on. Does that sound good?
I think I have to go.
Okay. Okay, well, why don't you... Okay, you can have this just for a little bit, okay? It's going to run out of energy in a minute. But Daddy will come in there and fix that in a minute. Okay, and then you have Iron Fist.
TV off because I'm not using it.
Okay. Okay, so same drill there. Then you have these Crushers, which I haven't used these yet, but it's just a bigger version of Mournfang. I think they ride a rhinoceros instead of the Mournfang things. So yeah, same drill, great weapons, plus Iron Fist. So you're noticing a trend here, like you're just getting bigger and better units kind of as you go, and kind of their top end tier 5 is quite strong. Like they have a lot of stats. It's very expensive, but they do have a lot of like big unit versus big unit superiority. So I think they're gonna do very well. I think. I mean, I haven't done against like Kislev, who has the bears. It's kind of like one of the best anti-cav units, or like Khorne's units. I haven't, fought with them, but I think that they could definitely hold their own, or perhaps even beat them in a lot of contexts. Now, some of the more unique units that they're gonna have, they do have artillery, and there aren't that many factions that have high quality artillery in Warhammer 3, so this is going to give you a pretty good advantage. These Nobbler Scrap Launchers, I have used these pretty extensively, and I gotta say, these are very, very impressive. First of all, you can hire them in one turn. A lot of these other big ticket tier 3 units, like the Gorgers, I think the Iron Guts, Mournfang Cavalry, a lot of these are 2 turns to hire, but you can get the Nobblers in 1 turn, which is fantastic. They have a lot of missile strength at 490. They have really good splash damage, a respectable amount of ammo. They are on a chariot type of unit, so they do move really quick at 66. You can reposition easily if people are trying to run you down, or even if you want to get around behind the enemy and fire into the back of them. It's pretty good. So their shot is basically, it's not as much of an arc as like a mortar, but it's certainly more than a cannon. And when it goes into the air, it kind of like splits off into a bunch of different pieces. It's almost like shrapnel that kind of comes down and just showers the enemy. So it's pretty good. And they have pretty heavy armor as well, so it's difficult to focus fire them down. And they do have anti-infantry, so they have like an okay charge bonus of 48. So you can charge them in there, but I don't think you want to do that most of the time unless you're just out of ammo and you just need to, find a use for them. But in my experience, and I don't know if this is a bug, it seems like they basically have perfect vigor. Because I've fired all my ammo and I've been running around the map with them before, and it always says they're fresh. They're not tired, their stats are not modified. So I don't know if that's intentional or a bug, but they seem to have perfect vigor, which is fantastic. So that means your charge is going to be much more valuable later on. You're going to be much more accurate with your shots, because when ranged units get tired, then they tend to be less accurate with their shots. I believe that's an actual stat that's like in the game. It gets modified by vigor. So yeah, those are fantastic. I just have great things to say about these. So I would highly recommend getting these. And you can get a technology, which we'll talk about in a second, which reduces their upkeep cost by 50%, which is massive. Now these man-eaters, or lead belchers, are pretty good too. I haven't gotten them personally, but I've played against them. And it doesn't say they splash, but they definitely do. Like how this works is they fire like a cannonball type of thing, which is like a line of sight gunpowder unit, so it's blocked by hills, it can't shoot over walls, that type of stuff, at least from what I've seen. But when it hits a unit, it pushes all the way back and hits every other unit in that row. So it's like a cannonball that doesn't explode. It hits the front line and just rolls back and rolls over everything else. So it does a lot to kind of deep deep infantry. So if you're ever against these things, you want to line them up to where it's like perpendicular, where you're like a straight line, like a T with these guys. Because if you don't do that, then it's just going to splash and just do a tremendous amount of damage to your entire unit. So you could put them on the flanks and just fire them right down the line if the enemy's lined up, and it's just going to do like an astronomical amount of damage. So these guys are quite good. They don't have the same range. They don't have the area of effect splash as the scrap launchers. But again, they have that kind of fairly unique line type of area of effect damage. So they're good. They do take 2 turns to hire, so most of the time I'd probably rather just get the scrap launchers. But they are going to be, pretty solid units. And they're probably better against other big units like ogres and things like that, because there's 16 of them firing, and they seem to be a lot more accurate than the scrap launcher. They're pretty solid. Now, I haven't tried the fire belly yet. Presumably, he's got fire magic, which I think has been nerfed, but I'm not 100% about that. But, you might as well pick him up on the way. And then you've got the Iron Blaster. Haven't tried this out. So I don't know if this is like a cannon or a mortar or what. But, I mean, that's certainly a lot of damage. It says it shoots 5 projectiles. I'm assuming they splash, although it doesn't say the splash. So maybe it's like a Queen Bess or something, or whatever that thing is that the Vampire Coast has. Like the huge cannon that, fires and does pretty good splash damage. I think it's probably pretty good. So you want to try that out. It'll be strong. So much of it just depends on how much it arcs. That's my thing with artillery a lot of the time. The stuff that's gunpowder that does not arc, that just kind of goes in a straight line, I think is really limited. Sometimes you still get it, but like cannons, I think, are far weaker than mortars most of the time, at least in the early to mid game. I just want that high arcing shot with a splash. But anyways, looks pretty good. I think that's about it. These stone horns, I think, are pretty good as well. If you can get them, they are expensive, but they remind me of mammoths. They do quite a bit of damage, have a huge charge bonus. I mean, they've got like 1 billion weight. Yeah, 9,000 weight. So they're definitely going to do some massive damage when they charge into people's bags. They have heavy armor-piercing damage, bonus versus infantry. So these things are just, like, absolute beasts. I would definitely get these. They will tear up, most of what the Empire is going to have. Just tons and tons of HP. Giants are kind of whatever. I mean, they have a lot of HP. They don't have nearly as much weight as the Stonehorns. They're okay, though. They don't have... The problem is the speed. They only have 39 speed, and their charge bonus is kind of low for a unit this expensive that's a monster. So I just don't think they're going to do the same level of impact damage as the Stonehorn. Now, the Stonehorn is more expensive, but the fact that they're on the same tree, it's like, why would you ever get a giant when you could just have a Stonehorn? Like, that's my opinion about it. So, I don't know. I could be wrong. Maybe the giants, on paper, they have bigger weapon strength, but... I don't know. Maybe I'm overestimating the Stonehorn, but I just feel like the Stonehorn is just way, way, way better the vast majority of the time. This guy even has missile resist. What the? Okay, yeah, it's a no-brainer then. This thing just naturally has 35% missile resist. I hadn't even noticed that before. So yeah, that's nuts. You obviously want to go with that. Okay, and then you can get a bigger Stonehorn, which has all of the same stats, I believe, but now it can also fire... a harpoon launcher, so I think that's probably intended to be good against other monsters like dragons and things like that, and not do a lot of splash damage. But nevertheless, looks pretty strong. Since we're on the camps, I might as well just go ahead and skip over and talk about them a little bit. So basically, how these camps work, it's kind of like a horde building, except it's stationary. You can't ever move it. You drop it in one place, and it has a sphere of influence. So it's like a black arc, basically, that you can't move. So you drop it down. It has its own army. Now, you can hire units and put it straight in there if you want to, and it is a reduced cost. So that is handy. So you can basically build a garrison, and then if you need to, you can hand off units from this to your army. So if your army's out fighting some other stuff, and you just kind of want to stock up and just be ready for your army just to kind of run back through and then hand off units, you can do that. So it's like protecting this area, but then also just ready to go. If you need to come in and just pick up like 10 units or something, you can do that. You do have to run over there and physically touch the camp to do it, but that can be handy. It does also allow you within the sphere of influence to hire any of the units that the camp offers, regardless of which province you're in. So it's not like a massive sphere of influence. I think Black Arcs are further, but it's pretty good. And you also get some other buffs. You get two extra meat. You get replenishment in foreign territory. It makes you immune to attrition, and there are some other buffs you can get as well. So like you can buy this, and it gives you this gluttony, which is basically a single target huge HP buff. This gives you extra post-battle loot damage when you're doing damage with it. So it's basically a stationary Black Arc, pretty much. However, one thing that's pretty cool about these is there's 10 building slots, but you don't have to have a specific camp level to get more building slots. It's basically always available, always kind of permanent, right? So if I just were to buy this, it automatically gives me another slot. So you basically have the maximum 10 slots at level 1 if you want. So you do have to pay some growth to do it, but that's handy. Also, everything is basically just 1 growth for these buildings, and that does not increase as you get more buildings. So if you remember the old school Chaos, and that might still be the same way with Warriors of Chaos in Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2, but every time you got a building, all of the other buildings cost more. So it was really trying to force you to specialize. So you'd have all these cool units, but you could only get like a handful of them because it was just too expensive. So your best strategy was always just to like pick one of these trees and just go. But with the ogres, you can get all of them at once, as long as you can afford it gold-wise. The growth cost is pretty negligible. So that's pretty cool. It does allow you to get kind of the full diversity of units. And you can get like pretty good growth. Like you can get your camp growth up to 16 here. There's some technologies where you can get some more. And just like horde growth, basically every 20 growth gives you 1 population, and that's always the same. It's flat, unlike normal growth with standard factions and standard towns. Your first one's like 100, your next one's 300, your next one's 600, and so on and so forth. It gets more expensive to get the extra growth. It's all flat, just like with the horde buildings, the traditional horde style. So that's very nice. That basically means you can grow up really, really fast. Like I lost one of these buildings in a fight early because basically one of the Empire people that I thought was neutral with me for the time being declared war on me and attacked it and killed it immediately when I was almost tier 3, so I had to start over. And even having to start over early, I'm still able to build the tier 4 right now. It's like turn 30 or something, 35. So if I hadn't been sacked, I could have comfortably been probably recruiting some tier 4 units between turn 30 and 35. So that's a lot faster than most factions. So that is very handy. And a couple of the other perks you can do with this, like I said, this one's good if you just want that gluttony ability. If you're about to have a tough siege, you just want a little bit of extra healing. This is okay. If you want to park a whole bunch of units in here to try to protect this place, that can be a good one. You pretty much always want the gold, and it does give quite a good amount of gold. It's pretty cheap to upgrade these things. So you just want to max out the gold as much as you can, because you don't have a lot of great ways to generate gold. We'll talk about that more in a second, but this is going to be the best ways to do it. So you want to upgrade that. So you pretty much always get the growth as fast as you can get it. It also gives you bigger recruitment capacity, so that's a perk. And then if you want, you can get some extra, meat from battles and all that stuff. The main reason you would do that is just to get extra butchers if you want to recruit some more. This one, if you're having meat problems, which hasn't really been an issue for me, but you could get that if you want it. But for the most part, you just go, gold, growth, max it as much as you can, and then just save the rest of it and get whichever tier 3s you want. Now, again, I would highly, highly prioritize the scrap launchers, because those are real game changers. That helps you out so much against enemy missile units and against like spears and halberds and stuff like that. You can focus those out. So those are great. If you do want the Mornfang, you can get those. Again, the ogres are pretty good at charge cycling. Those are obviously better, but that's something that's possible. I don't think you need man-eaters most of the time. Like, they are expensive, but they're just better normal ogres. But if you're just like turbo rich and you want to get some man-eaters, they're cool. They just don't offer anything unique tactically. But like I said, scrap launchers, and then the other big one is the Stonehorn. I think is very special in the fact that it just rampages infantry units so hardcore that I would definitely try to get that pretty soon. So those are the two things I would really look for, are the scrap launcher, possibly the lead belchers if you want to have a little bit more variety, and then the Stonehorns. Those are the big ticket ones. And then if you go with Scrag, grab some Gorgers. They're cheap. You just kind of want to do it. If you can replace all of your Ogre Bulls with Gorgers, if you have time to do that, that's fine. And then also the Iron Guts, if you're Gold Tooth, just replace all of your standard Ogres with Iron Guts because they're cheap, then you can do that too. Okay, so that's pretty much it as far as the camps go. Now, I will say there are different technologies that give you camps, and we'll talk about the techs here in just a second, but I would just try to throw it on these camps as fast as you can. It doesn't have to be the perfect spot, but the big thing is you just want that gold rolling out as fast as possible because you just don't make a lot of money as Ogres typically. Let me see how we're looking on time here. Oh, we're all right. Okay. Okay. So camps, very good. Ogres, very strong early on. Expert siege attackers, you can attack walls or gates. You also do get, speaking of sieges, and I'm not sure why you get this, but I think every lord just gets this special ability that pops up like once every minute that'll just automatically blow up a wall. And I haven't found a reason why you get that, or if it's just an ogre thing. But you get this thing where you just point click on like a portion of the wall and you blow it up. You can also blow up towers, not towers just during siege battles that are on the walls. You can blow those up, but the ones they build with the defensive supplies, you can't blow those up. But yeah, you can just like automatically crack anywhere you want. So they're just insane at knocking out walls and really getting into the towns. They have really good healing. So one of the army abilities here that I've researched technology-wise gives you 18 seconds at 1.6 and basically replenishes all of your vigor. Now this is just single target and it's got a 2-minute cooldown. I believe it's your tier 2 army ability, but it's basically going to heal somebody up for, I don't know, like 35% of their health. Great on a Stonehorn, great on a Lord, just really good ability. So that's strong, and then there are some Ogre magics you can get as well. That can give you some more healing. So you have pretty good healing. Not like Nurgle level healing, but it's pretty good. And just in general, they are pretty poor. So that camp right there is a special thing you have to put down, and it can't be too close to a town. But your normal towns, every single town, whether it's a capital, whether it's a, anything, is just going to have this basic layout, which is pretty much pretty garbage. It's pretty garbage, if we're going to be honest. They have okay defense. They get cannon towers at, I think, 950 supplies. So, again, not as good as Nurgle on defense, but better than a lot of factions. And those cannon towers are good. And they do have pretty good, garrisons in general. You get, a decent amount of units. They have a lot of HP. Obviously the Nobblers aren't fantastic. But getting, some Mournfang and some Ogre Bulls is very good for defense. And you can get a defensive building at level 1. And it's pretty cheap. So over here in Gristle Valley, for example, I actually upgraded to tier 3, or I guess tier 2, because I was spooked that the Empire was going to come get me. But even at tier 1, it's decent, right? You get 2 extra Nobblers, Nobbler Trappers, Ogre Bulls with dual weapons, and you get extra defensive supplies per turn. So they do have access to one of the best, cost-efficient garrisons out there. So that's good. But you just don't make any money. The main place here just gives you 50 gold per turn. A lot of factions, the main town is 100 per level. With Ogres, it's 50 per level, and then your gold is just 50 per turn. Now, on a cost basis, that's not, horrible. It pays for itself in 10 turns, but it's still only 50 gold. A lot of places are going to be at least 100. Or they'll have some other things that also, give you more money. But yeah, these are really kind of lacking. You can get growth, you can get a little bit of control. It's pretty wimpy. It's not expensive, it's cheap, but it's wimpy, in my mind. Now, the big way that you do make money is you trade with people. So especially with Scrag, I would try to set up trade with the Norskins early on, which is what I've been doing. So get any diplomacy modifiers you can acquire early, and just get on good terms with the Norskins to start trading with them, because this can give you decent gold, but Otherwise, your gold kind of sucks outside of your camps. You know, like, you do get some sack money, but you don't have that many crazy modifiers to your sack money or to post-battle loot or anything like that. There are some, but it's not like Nurgle's, like, 250% extra sack money on a plague, right? So, they can have some financial troubles. It's not going to be as bad as, like, Khorne, or, you know, there are a few other factions that are also pretty poor. So I would say it's middling to maybe a little below average on the income. Unless there's something I'm missing. But yeah, these camps are not, I just wouldn't upgrade them. And unless you're afraid that, unless you're afraid that you're going to die or something like that, I would just leave them tier 1 and just get the resource buildings as much as you can. And like I said, just try to get that trade going. You don't have that many trade modifiers. I know Goldtooth, I think it's plus 25% to trade. But anyways, yeah, just try to play nice with them. Okay, contracts. You do get some money from contracts. I can't pull it up right now because we're already kind of on a mission here. But, is it over here? I'm trying to remember. But they're pretty wimpy. Usually it's like 750 gold for these contracts, and it's pretty much just like, go kill this army, go sack this town or whatever. Like, it's not really that creative or interesting in my mind, and sometimes it's worth it, but I don't really think it's worth going out of your way. So pretty much they'll give you an option of like 3 different things, 2 or 3 different things, different armies or whatever you can sack or attack, and it gives you some diplomacy. So like the Norskins are asking me to kill, you know, Nordland or whatever, and I get a little bit of extra gold. So like this one I think is a contract, yeah. So you get 505 treasury and then 40 diplomacy with scaling, so it's alright. You know, that might be a lot better with Goldtooth if the ogres are giving you contracts and you're improving your diplomacy with them to the point where you might eventually be able to confederate with them. Then I think maybe it's pretty good. It's a way to like move towards a confederation. But with Scrag, it's okay. It's just not worth going out of your way most of the time. I wish the gold was a little bit more like caravan style gold. Maybe not quite that much, but like at least 1,500 gold or something, 1,000 or 1,500. But it's like 500, 700 gold is like not even worth, you know, worth messing with most of the time. So yeah, the contracts are a little underwhelming. You do have another mechanic called big names. So when you complete certain objectives, and it's not saying what it is here because I've unlocked all of these, but it'll be like, you know, sack 5 towns, win 5 battles, just do your thing normally on the map, and these will unlock. And you almost always just want to go with the diplomacy plus 8% campaign movement range because, you know, movement range is so good. And the diplomacy, again, can help you with confederations or trade agreements, whatever. Now, if you do need more meat, if somehow you're just perpetually running out of meat, then you can, you know, go for the extra meat. But for the most part, it's a false choice. You're always just going to get World Swallower. There could be a couple other ones that I'm just not aware of, but it seems a little underdeveloped in my mind as a mechanic. I don't think he had any different ones. He hasn't actually unlocked any, which again is a little weird. I don't know how you unlock them most of the time, but maybe it's only if you're the melee lords. Maybe it doesn't work if you're a mage lord. But you know, this guy's level 26, and I still haven't gotten an option to unlock a big name. So I don't know. I know in another playthrough I was practicing, like, this guy has a big name as a hunter. Okay, so these are different. These are different. So maybe it is only certain types of characters. Okay, so the hunters, missile strength 20%. That's actually extremely good. That is extremely good. Okay, so that's a little bit more cool. So maybe I've only seen some of the really generic ones, but that one's actually like incredibly powerful. But yeah, it's just like go do these things, and you get some buffs. But yeah, that one's pretty crazy. I got to get some lead belchers and make that happen. Um, okay, that's Scrag again. And then this is a Hunter. Okay, and he does have different ones. So he has got Campaign, Line of Sight, Frenzy. So it does look to be somewhat random. Which is annoying because, like, that makes me just want to hire Hunters and delete them every turn until I get the option of getting this. Because, like, this is so profoundly, like, stronger than all of these other ones because it's your entire army. These are just buffs just for the Hunter. But this is just, like, nutty power compared to the other ones. So, I don't know. I hadn't noticed that before, but I'm not a big fan of that mechanic, I guess, because, again, it's just RNG encouraging you to hire and delete lords until you get what you want. But, anyways. Okay, as far as the food goes, as I mentioned before, it's kind of like Skaven food, where it's an extra currency you get just from doing normal things, just winning battles, sacking towns. You can get it through camps, technologies, all that kind of stuff. But unlike Skaven, this is on an army by army basis. They have food instead of faction-wide food basis. And nothing really matters unless you run out of food, I think. If you run out of food, I'm not sure. I assume it's probably attrition. But each unit takes up food. So this takes up, 20 food. And typically, if you're winning a battle every turn and you're standing on your property, like, if you're, like, taking over towns, you're not going to run out of food because you're going to get 10 from being in a province that you own. And then you're also going to be getting 10 to 20 from battles, sometimes more, depending on how many units you kill. So usually food's not an issue. It's a little bit light on this guy because he's just been kind of running around, like repositioning and didn't get into a fight for a while. But this guy's got like 210 because he's just been constantly fighting. So if it's a problem, you can just delete some of your units, or you can do some of those temporary buffs in order to get more food. But typically, it's not a big deal, and you don't really think about it that much or do anything with it, in my opinion. Maybe there will be some events that show up that ask you to, like, cash in food for certain things, but I haven't seen that. It's just, like, the only other thing you spend food on typically is, like, this sacrifice to the maw. But otherwise, it's just a bar that you watch and just make sure you don't hit 0. So, again, kind of a bland mechanic right now. Hopefully they'll do a little bit more with it. So it's like the ogres have a lot of mechanics that are like, should be interesting, but some of them are just a little anemic. Like the contracts, the big names are like okay, but not great. The food is like okay, but I think the Skaven food is more interesting because it's faction wide and you get buffs. And, like, your towns cost food and your armies. I don't know. I feel like the Skaven is a little more balanced and interesting in terms of the food. Okay. Alright, let's talk about... let's talk about magic here really quick. And then we'll go into the text, the skills, and we'll talk about combat a little bit, and then we'll call it a day. Okay, so you do get access to beast magic early. And I would go for this. Flock of Doom is still just incredibly powerful. You guys will remember this from Warhammer 1, but it looks like they haven't nerfed it that much, maybe a little bit. But, like, that's almost 1,400 damage per unit hit, and there's no cap. And it's 35 meter range, or it's 35 meter radius with 300 range when you overcast it. So, it means you can cast it across the battlefield safely before they're anywhere close to you, and usually you can hit at least 4 battalions by the enemy, sometimes more if they're clumped up, but usually like 4. And so it's going to do somewhere in the neighborhood of like 1,400 per, so that's basically like 5,600 damage ranged, and you can just cast this a ton, usually 3 times before they get close to you. So you're kicking off the battle with like 15,000 damage off of Flock of Doom. So it's incredibly powerful. It's one of the best spells in the game. It always has been. It's really cost efficient. They may have increased the cost marginally from what I'm remembering. I think the initial cast is like 6 or something. It's 5 before you overcast it, but you only get half the value out of it. It's only 7 seconds, so it's really, really good, especially against entry-level infantry spears, swords, stuff like that. So with your lord, I would get the beast lords, unless the normal lords can get big names. I still might even get the beast lords and then just like rush towards Flock of Doom ASAP and maybe Whistlin's Wild Heart rather, and then go down to the blue tree after that. But I would just get this ASAP. Now you can get more wizards later on in the game, so it just kind of depends. But yeah, that's definitely where I would go. As far as the wizards go and their skills, you're probably not going to cast most of this other stuff. I think they did buff this curse to where now it's melee defense and melee attack, and it lasts for 21 seconds, so it's like okay, but not great. This thing is pretty good at helping you kill enemy lords, like dueling lords. And it used to be like really nice on sieges to be able to get up on the ramparts and tear stuff up. But now that most sieges are multi-front, so you can run around the perimeter, you can just run around the perimeter with ogres and bash down walls. And so it's not as important to have the flying units. They're cool, like they can go kill towers and things, but it's so expensive. Even with the cost reduction, it's 14. I'd probably just rather cast more Flock of Dooms. Now, this Pan's Impenetrable Pelt, I think they buffed this. This is actually pretty interesting. That it gives you 25 movement speed, which does affect your impact damage off charges. Gives you missile resist and melee defense. Okay, thank you. So that's something where if the enemy has a lot of missile units, that could be interesting to run in there, potentially with that. You want to get the replenished troops, obviously. And then eventually, I think just getting Feastmaster for the extra replenishment rate and to give you regeneration. So yeah, beasts are good. You do have a new kind of magic with ogres, and you can pick these guys as the Feastmasters instead of beasts. And it's like, it's okay, but it just buffs your army a little bit. It does give you some replenishment here. You know, you've got like a lowers leadership, this one, but that's not AoE. So that's just single target, lowers leadership. Like, pretty underwhelming. This one is AoE, but it gives you armor and missile resist, which is like okay. The Pan's Impenetrable Pelt, I think, is better. You've got this, which is like pretty good explosion damage. That looks like that's pretty good. It's a pretty low radius of only 8 meters. So small strike area. It's all right, not insane. Troll Guts. This is very good. It's only single entity, but it lasts for 80 seconds. So that's basically just gonna like regeneration cap whoever you cast it on. So again, this would be fantastic on like a Stonehorn or a Lord or whatever. It's basically gonna heal them, keep them at full health for 80 seconds. That's really, really strong, but very, very expensive also for a single target heal. The Maw, huge explosion area, pretty good damage. It's okay. You know, it's alright, but I would still just rather have Beast because you get Flock of Doom, mostly just Flock of Doom spam over and over again. Then you have the utility if you do want that curse for kind of late game, you know, tier 5 heavy hitters versus heavy hitters, lowering the enemy's movement speed, especially on cavalry, and their melee defense and their melee attack for like 30 seconds, I think is going to be better than most of these other things. So, anyways, I would probably just stick with Beast Magic. And while we're here, just checking the time over here. We're almost out of time. But while we're here, let's just go ahead and walk through the skills real quickly. So most of the time, as with most factions, I recommend just going into the blue tree early. What you're wanting to get is healer here. 6% replenishment is a big deal. It's always nice. Corruption's okay. It's up to you. It really doesn't matter. It's just 1 point in one of these other ones. Then you get Reader of Portents, 10% research. It's okay. It's not game breaking, but it's alright. And then the real prize here is just getting down to Quartermaster for minus 9% cost, and then Renowned and Feared. It's just one of the best skill points in the game. You get Recruit rank, enemy hero success chance lowered, you get campaign movement, upkeep reduction. It's just extremely good. But the real draw is the 8% here, and then the 9% here is 17% upkeep reduction. Really, really good. Now, they did nerf Lightning Strike, so you have to get 3 points to get the old school, like, isolation of a single entity or a single enemy. And you have, it says reduced vigor. You literally start off exhausted. It's like the worst vigor like possible. So you really don't want to do that most of the time unless you're in an extreme situation. So you're just going to have to fight your way through a lot of multi-army fights. And then now this does give you more time to deal with the first army before you move on to the second one, right? You can get up to, I think it's 50% reinforcement time. But that's something to think about. And then you can get extra meat from camps if you need it. Again, meat's not usually a big deal. Income from buildings is kind of bad. So the blue tree's not really that impressive. And like this portents is worse than the thing that gives you plus 30% healing on your ward, right? Like Nurgle gets and like a lot of other factions get. So it's pretty wimpy. It's not a great blue tree, but I think the 17% upkeep reduction still warrants it. And then in the red tree, this is another option if you don't want to go blue, or you can do the second. You definitely want to get Tools of Destruction, extra damage for scrap launchers, blasters, lead belchers. Just those things are going to do a ton of damage. You really, really want this upgrade. I think Bull Charge, if you're just using a lot of Bull Ogres, this can be good. And I find myself still using a ton of them just because they're only one turn to hire, and you can just get them off of a base town just like immediately. You don't have to have any extra. You might have to have a tier 1 building, but it's like you can get them very easily, right? Versus with the camps, you have to be in range, and some of those units like the Gorgers and the lead belchers, a lot of other things are 2 turns to hire, which sucks. Like that's a very big deal. So yeah, the Bull Charge is worth it. I probably wouldn't do the scrappy things. If you want to, use Nobblers more, you can get that, but it's like super early game versus the Bull Ogres. I think will still be relevant even into mid, possibly even late game. Especially like this includes all of those Ogre Bulls, including the Iron Fists and the dual weapons. So it's pretty good. The other ones are pretty underwhelming. Weapon strength and charge bonus for Mournfang stuff, and then you get Saber Tusk, Stonehorn, Gorgers, charge bonus, and armor. It's okay, but it's not fantastic. And then, of course, just anything else that, makes sense as far as Lord's specialties. Okay, and then we'll do the technologies really quickly and call it a day. So, I think you want to... sorry, just pulling up this over here. You want to go for Sky Titan defenses, I think is the big one early on. So this right here, you get 500 defensive supplies per turn when under siege. That's just insane. Now, I don't know what per turn means, if that's per minute or if that's literally per second. If it's per second, that's like infinite defensive resources. But even if it's per minute, like, getting 9 per second or something like that is going to be huge, right? It's going to help you, just upgrade your towers, build more barriers, just all this kind of stuff. And that's what you're going to need because people are going to be attacking you all the time. And like I said, your camps are okay. They're not the best garrisons in the world, but they're pretty good. And this is just going to help you be really aggressive and not have to worry about people backdooring you all the time. Because your towns are much more likely to be able to take care of themselves when you get this. So you want to get over there ASAP. And this is a little misleading, the way this tech tree looks, because it confused me. I thought that you had to have both of these to get to Ogre Throng because it has 2 things going there, but you don't. It can be either one of them. So if I click on this, if you see, I can get to this without having to do anything in this tree. So don't get tricked by that. You can pick which way you want to go. And I think you should pick one way. I would not stick around and get everything. In general, I think... going through the bottom way is the best way to go on most of these. So you get Ogre Bull melee attack, you get casualty replenishment, which is very good, you get control, which is going to help you so you don't have too many rebellions in a province. And then I would get larger fire pits early just for the extra growth on your camps. So I would take a small detour for that. But everything else, I would just skip it for now. Income from buildings is obviously going to be very good late game if you have, 50 towns or something. But this stuff up here is, all right. Raiding, you're probably not going to raid most of the time. They don't get a lot of bonuses for raiding. 20 growth when in enemy territory does sound very good, but the thing is, you don't want to sit around and wait on that. You just want to conquer it and keep moving on. Your growth is going to be really high anyways. So, it's that's cute. But, like, what I did is I tried that out in my campaign. I basically put this on an Empire property, and I just sacked them. And went around and killed other stuff, and then I would just check in like every 5 turns or so and just sack it again and kill them. But it was just really kind of a pain in the butt, 'cause I kept having to double back and deal with it, so it's not worth it most of the time. Like, it's cool if you get it, but it's not a huge deal. Gold standard sacking and looting bonus is huge, but you have to go really far out of your way to get that if you're going for the lower tree. And I think, like I said, I think the lower tree just all around is better. And then Ogre Throng, this gives you an extra camp, and it gives you an extra population when you complete a camp, and it gives you that Butcher ability, which is really, really nice in combat to just heal up one of your big monsters a ton. And then down here, these are okay. It's like minus 5% for Ogres, plus 2 for Fire Bellies is kind of whatever. Extra 5 meat for every army is pretty good. This is pretty solid. If you do have a lot of trade partners, you have like 5 trade partners or something, that can be pretty solid. These contract things, again, the contracts are so laughable anyways. It doesn't matter in terms of the income. Big Attempts is cool, but this one you do have to have both. See? So this one's misleading because you do have to have both for this, but you don't have to have both for this. So to me, it was confusing. But Big Attempts is cool, but I wouldn't go out of your way for it. Then over here, again, you get another army ability. I haven't tried this yet. Looks really strong. Same drill, more camps, all that good stuff. And then the Sky Titan defense. All right, a couple more minutes. And then after that, I had larger fire pits, hunting tricks. I would just try to run to the end here. Just go straight through the bottom like this, all the way over to hunting tricks. And that gives you extra meat from your camps. 5% upkeep for infantry. Recruitment costs for Stonehorns, which are good. Extra camp stuff. Income from trade. Mournfang. Plus 10 armor for man-eaters. Again, most of these aren't that great either. That's really nice. That's really nice. The extra plus 3 surplus for camps. Ambush, depending on how you play, could be good. If you like to do the whole, have one army out ahead of the other one and try to trick the enemy into an ambush, you can do that. I try not to do that. I think that's borderline cheese. There are some times when that's kind of necessary. Like the Demon Prince, for example. You might have to do that some, but if you like doing that, then that's a good option if you want to ambush. I think that's pretty much it. The scrap collectors. Yeah, I would take a detour after Sky Titans and get scrap collectors. This is minus 50% for Nobblers and Nobbler scrap launchers. And I would personally, most of the time, probably try to have 3 or 4 Nobbler scrap launchers in every army most of the time. So that'll probably save you a good 300 or 400 gold per turn. So that is going to be pretty solid. And if you do like to use Nobblers, obviously that's going to make them even cheaper. So that's pretty solid. And then I think I talked about these earlier, but kind of the gold standard and tribal tribute. So that's pretty good. So yeah, I mean, there are some other ones. So just kind of see what you want. But that's the general gist. Those are your early goals in my mind, is get to this. It's going to take care of all your towns. It's going to make it incredibly difficult for the enemy to backdoor you. And then maybe something like scrap collectors just to give you some good cash. And then, from there, just kind of figure out what you want. But anyways, I think that's going to be about it for the campaign. As far as, just fighting, like I mentioned before, just look for flanks, with your ogres. Try to charge cycle them. If you want an early front line, if you're just used to that, you can use the Nobblers, are a cheap option. More expensive are the Iron Guts. If you want that army, especially with Gold Tooth, that's good. Later on, you can use the Stonehorn to face tank stuff if you need to. Once you get the scrap launchers, just soften them up as much as you can with the scrap launchers. Make them come to you, and then just see if you can split them up with your ogres. Just start to surround them. Break them up a little bit, and then just charge cycle and wear them out. On sieges, as I said before, you can just go in the front door with the scrap launchers if you want, or you can just run around the side and start knocking out the walls or knocking out other gates, and then infiltrate the town and get a good position before they're set and ready to take you on. That's very good versus like spears and halberds. It's just to get into the town and get them to split up before they can form a really solid wall to stop you from charge cycling. But anyways, that's going to be it. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did. Check out the campaign. I'm going to release an episode here in a few hours. And do check out the other guides as well for Nurgle and Slaanesh, and then check out that Nurgle campaign. And like I said, the next one's probably going to be a Miao Ying guide and campaign, so stay tuned for that over the next week or so. But anyways, that's it. Have a good day. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.